The golden morning sun bathed the towering glass structure of Carter Enterprises, a billion-dollar empire built by Michael Carter, a man known for his sharp business instincts and ruthless approach to power. Inside, the office buzzed with energy, employees rushing to their desks, phones ringing, and assistants scurrying with urgent documents. The air smelled of freshly brewed coffee and expensive cologne, a fitting atmosphere for a man who thrived on control. Michael Carter, in his custom-tailored suit, sat in his corner office, sipping a finely aged whiskey despite the early hour. He scanned the stock reports on his tablet, smirking as his numbers soared higher. To him, wealth was the only measure of a man's worth. If you weren't rich, you were insignificant. At the front entrance, a tall black man in tattered clothes hesitated before stepping inside. His shoes were worn out, his hands rough from hardship, but his posture remained upright, carrying a quiet dignity. His name was James Reynolds, and despite his appearance, there was something striking about him, an air of wisdom, a presence that demanded attention without a single word. As James approached the front desk, the receptionist's smile faded. She glanced nervously at the security guard, who stepped forward. "Sir, I'm going to have to ask you to leave," the guard said sternly, eyeing James with suspicion. "I just need a moment," James replied, his voice calm yet firm. "I'm here to see someone." Before he could say another word, Michael Carter himself appeared. With a sharp glare and a dismissive wave, he scoffed. "What is this? A homeless shelter? Get out before I call the police." The office fell silent. The story had begun. A heavy silence settled over the luxurious office lobby. The receptionist nervously adjusted her glasses, avoiding eye contact with the man now standing before Michael Carter, the ruthless CEO of Carter Enterprises. James Reynolds, with his worn-out clothes and calloused hands, met Michael's sharp gaze without flinching. Despite his ragged appearance, there was no desperation in his eyes, only patience. Michael folded his arms, his expression a mixture of amusement and disgust. "Who let you in here?" he demanded, his voice laced with irritation. Employees and visitors in the lobby began whispering among themselves, watching the scene unfold like spectators at a show. James kept his posture firm. "I came to see someone," he said evenly, his voice steady but calm. Michael let out a dry laugh, shaking his head. "Oh, I've seen this trick before. You people come in here spinning sob stories, hoping to get a handout." He took a step closer, lowering his voice, but loud enough for everyone to hear. "Let me make something clear. This is a place for people who matter, for people who work hard and earn their place. You don't belong here." A few of the employees shifted uncomfortably, but no one spoke up. The rich man's word was law in this building. James remained calm, unfazed by the public humiliation. "I didn't come here to beg." Michael scoffed. "Oh, then what?" "Looking for a job. Maybe I should give you one. Cleaning the bathrooms." A few people chuckled, and Michael smirked, enjoying his audience. "Or better yet, I'll have security throw you out before you stink up the place." James exhaled slowly, as if measuring his words carefully. "You shouldn't judge people so quickly." Michael's expression darkened. "And you shouldn't waste my time." He snapped his fingers, signaling to the two security guards standing near the entrance. "Get this man out of my building." The guards hesitated for a moment, but at Michael's icy glare, they stepped forward. One of them grabbed James's arm, but James didn't resist. As he was led toward the exit, he turned his head slightly and said, "You'll regret this." His tone wasn't a threat, just a statement of fact. Michael rolled his eyes, already moving on from the situation. Yeah, I'll lose sleep over it," he muttered sarcastically, waving him off. The doors shut behind James, and just like that, the man was erased from Michael Carter's world. But not everyone was so quick to forget. Standing a few feet away, Jessica Carter, Michael's 16-year-old daughter, had watched the entire scene unfold. Her father had always been a man of power, but this time, she didn't feel admiration, she felt ashamed. Something about the way James had held himself, the quiet wisdom in his voice, unsettled her. As Michael strutted back toward his office, Jessica hesitated, then turned and ran outside. James was already at the sidewalk, adjusting his tattered coat against the cold morning breeze. Jessica approached him carefully, her heart pounding. "I'm sorry about my dad," she said softly. James looked at her, his expression warm despite everything that had happened. "It's not your fault." She hesitated, then pulled out some money from her purse and extended it to him. "Here, at least take this." James didn't even glance at the bills. Instead, he smiled and said something Jessica would never forget. "Kindness will take you further than wealth ever will," and with that, he walked away. Jessica stood there, watching him disappear into the busy streets. She had a feeling this wasn't the last time they would see each other. Inside the building, Michael Carter had no idea that the man he had just thrown out would soon change his life forever. Jessica stood on the sidewalk, watching as James Reynolds disappeared into the crowded streets. His words echoed in her mind. "Kindness will take you further than wealth ever will." She glanced down at the untouched money still in her hand, feeling an unfamiliar weight settle in her chest. She had grown up surrounded by luxury, but for the first time, she questioned what it all really meant. Inside the towering Carter Enterprises building, her father, Michael Carter, had already forgotten about the homeless man he had humiliated. He returned to his lavish office, adjusting the cufflinks on his designer suit, as he sank into his plush leather chair. The morning stock reports flashed on his screen. Everything was going as planned. Power, success, control, these were the only things that mattered. Just then, his assistant, Rachel, rushed in, her face pale. "Sir, you have an urgent call from Ethan Walters." Michael's expression shifted. Ethan Walters wasn't just any businessman. He was a billionaire investor, one of the wealthiest men in the country, and a potential partner for a major deal. Michael snatched up the phone, forcing a confident smile. "Ethan, always a pleasure." Ethan's deep voice came through the line, calm yet firm. "Michael, I'm stopping by your office shortly. I have a special guest with me. I expect you to treat him with the utmost respect." Michael's chest swelled with pride. If Ethan was bringing someone personally, it had to be another powerful figure, perhaps an investor or a high-profile entrepreneur. This could be the opportunity of a lifetime. "Of course, Ethan," Michael said smoothly. "I'll have everything prepared." As the call ended, Michael straightened his tie and signaled for his assistant. "Make sure everything is perfect. I want my best team in the conference room." Meanwhile, outside the building, Jessica still stood deep in thought when her father's luxury black car pulled up. A driver stepped out, holding the door open for her. She hesitated before getting in, her thoughts still lingering on the man her father had dismissed so cruelly. A strange feeling crept over her, like something big was about to happen. Back in the office, Michael checked his watch impatiently. His team stood ready, briefcases in hand, waiting for Ethan Walters to arrive. The doors to the main entrance suddenly swung open, and all eyes turned toward the incoming guests. Ethan Walters walked in first, his presence alone commanding attention. He was dressed in a crisp navy blue suit, exuding the effortless confidence of a man who had nothing to prove. But it wasn't Ethan who stole the breath from Michael's lungs. It was the man walking beside him, James Reynolds. Michael's face drained of color, the same homeless man he had just thrown out. James stood there, no longer just another face in the crowd, but someone important. Someone Michael had gravely misjudged. And the worst part, Ethan was smiling. The real lesson was about to begin. Michael Carter's breath caught in his throat. He blinked, convinced his eyes were playing tricks on him. James Reynolds, the same man he had just humiliated and thrown out like garbage, was now standing in his office, walking side by side with Ethan Walters, one of the most influential businessmen in the country. The air in the room thickened with tension. Michael's employees, who had witnessed the earlier scene in the lobby, exchanged nervous glances, realizing the gravity of the situation. Rachel, his assistant, looked away, clearly uncomfortable. Ethan clapped James on the back, grinning. "Michael, I'd like you to meet an old friend of mine, James Reynolds." He gestured toward James with a look of deep respect. "He's a brilliant entrepreneur, a philanthropist, and a key partner in several of my ventures. I owe a great deal of my success to him." Michael's mouth went dry. His usual charm and confidence deserted him. James studied Michael, his expression calm, unreadable. "Nice to see you again, Mr. Carter," he said, his voice even. Michael forced a laugh, but it came out strained. "I think there's been some misunderstanding," he stammered. "I didn't realize." James raised a hand, silencing him effortlessly. "You didn't realize who I was," he finished for him. "I know, you saw a man in worn-out clothes and assumed he was worthless." Michael felt an icy chill creep down his spine. His mind raced for an escape, a way to salvage the situation, but no words came. Ethan sighed, shaking his head. Michael, I have to admit, I'm disappointed. His tone wasn't angry, but the weight behind his words made Michael's stomach churn. James and I go way back. We built businesses together, and more importantly, we believe in treating people with dignity, regardless of their status. James folded his hands in front of him, his demeanor still composed. I wasn't here looking for charity, Mr. Carter. I was here for a personal reason. He let the statement hang in the air before continuing, and instead of listening, you humiliated me, mocked me, and had security drag me out like I was nothing. Michael swallowed hard. His employees shifted uncomfortably. He could feel their silent judgment, their quiet condemnation. Jessica, who had just entered the office, stood frozen near the door, watching everything unfold. She had suspected her father had made a mistake, but now the full reality hit her. This wasn't just a mistake, it was a complete failure of character. Desperate to save face, Michael forced a weak chuckle. It was a misunderstanding, he repeated, trying to sound casual. James, had I known who you were. James cut him off again, this time with a knowing smile. And that's the problem, isn't it? His voice was soft, but it carried across the room with undeniable power. You only respect people when you believe they have something to offer you. Michael had never felt so small in his own office. Ethan took a step forward, his expression firm. Michael, I came here today to finalize our investment deal, but after what I witnessed, I'm having second thoughts. Michael's heart pounded. Ethan, wait. Ethan held up a hand. I built my empire on trust, integrity and respect. If I partner with someone, I need to know they share those values. But you judge people by their appearance. That's not the kind of leadership I align myself with. Michael's vision blurred at the edges. This deal was worth millions. Losing it could mean a serious blow to his company's future. His mind raced for a way to fix things, but for the first time in his life, words failed him. James exhaled, looking at Michael with something resembling pity. People like you think money makes you powerful, he said. But real power comes from how you treat others. Michael opened his mouth, but no words came. Ethan turned to James. Let's go. We have other business to attend to. James nodded, casting one last glance at Michael. Then without another word, he and Ethan walked out. Jessica watched them leave, her heart pounding. She turned to her father, who stood ashen-faced, staring at the door. For the first time in her life, she wasn't proud to be Michael Carter's daughter. And for the first time in his life, Michael Carter felt true regret. Michael Carter collapsed into his chair, feeling the weight of the moment pressed down on him. The room was silent, save for the faint hum of the air conditioning. His employees avoided his gaze, shuffling awkwardly before slowly dispersing. The damage had been done. Jessica remained standing, arms crossed, staring at her father with disappointment. You always told me that respect is earned, she said quietly. But today you proved that you only respect people when they look the part. Michael let out a long, shaky breath. I made a mistake, he admitted, rubbing his temples. A terrible mistake. Jessica sighed, shaking her head. Dad, it wasn't just a mistake. It was a reflection of who you are. Her voice wavered, but she held her ground. You humiliated that man, and you lost a major deal because of it. But more than that, you lost something bigger, your dignity. Her words hit Michael harder than he expected. He had spent decades building his empire, crafting an image of power and authority. But in one afternoon, he had been exposed. He wasn't the strong, respected CEO he thought he was. He was just another arrogant businessman who had forgotten the value of basic human decency. As the truth settled in, regret clawed at his chest. Meanwhile, outside the towering Carter Enterprises building, James Reynolds and Ethan Walters walked side by side, their steps steady. James glanced back for a moment, his expression unreadable. People like Michael Carter remind me why I do what I do, he mused. So many in power forget where they came from. They forget that wealth is temporary, but character is everything. Ethan nodded. That's why you'll always be different, James. You don't let money define you, he smiled. You see people for who they really are. James exhaled, his mind flashing back to a time when he had been judged. Years ago, before his success, he had walked these streets, homeless and forgotten by society. Back then, no one had seen potential in him. No one had believed in his worth. Except one person, his mother. Her voice echoed in his mind. Never let the world tell you who you are, son. Let your heart decide that for you. And that was exactly what he had done. Back in his office, Michael sat alone, staring at the city skyline, through the massive glass windows. Everything suddenly felt hollow. The wealth, the power, the reputation. What was it all worth if he had no integrity? For the first time in years, he didn't feel invincible. He felt small. His thoughts drifted back to James Reynolds, to the quiet strength in his voice, to the unwavering confidence in his posture. Michael had misjudged him completely. He had seen a man in tattered clothes, and assumed he was worthless. Yet that same man had more dignity in his silence than Michael had in his entire career. The realization was suffocating. That evening, Jessica found her father sitting in the darkened living room of their penthouse apartment, nursing a glass of whiskey. He looked up as she entered, his expression weary. "I don't know how to fix this," he admitted. "I don't know if I even can." Jessica hesitated before sitting beside him. "Maybe you start by acknowledging your failure instead of running from it," she suggested. "Maybe you start by being better." Michael let out a hollow chuckle. "And how do I do that?" She studied him for a long moment before speaking. "You go find James Reynolds," she said simply, "and you apologize." Michael stiffened. The thought of facing James after what he had done made his stomach turn, but deep down, he knew Jessica was right. If he wanted redemption, he had to earn it. The next morning, Michael Carter did something he had never done before. He stepped out of his comfort zone. Dressed in a simple navy blue suit, without the usual extravagance, he made his way to a local shelter for the homeless, one he had never paid attention to before. When he arrived, he found James sitting among a group of volunteers, handing out meals with a warm smile. He looked up as Michael approached, his eyes calm, but unreadable. For the first time in his life, Michael Carter felt nervous. He cleared his throat, unsure where to begin. "James, I need to say something." James waited, silent. Michael took a deep breath. "I judged you unfairly. I saw your clothes, your appearance, and I made assumptions. I treated you like you were beneath me, and I was wrong." He swallowed hard. "I was a fool, and I'm sorry." The words hung in the air. James studied him for a long moment before nodding. "Apology accepted," he said simply. Michael exhaled, feeling an unexpected weight lift from his chest. He had spent his life believing apologies were a sign of weakness, but now, he realized, they were a sign of strength. As he turned to leave, James called after him, "Mr. Carter." Michael turned. James smiled, extending his hand. "Would you like to help us serve today?" Michael hesitated. Then, for the first time in years, he smiled, a real, genuine smile. "Yeah," he said softly. "I think I would." And in that moment, for the first time in his life, Michael Carter understood what real wealth truly meant.